Hello, guys. In this session, we are going to discuss a significant ruling by Supreme Court of India, a decision that has overturned a landmark judgment from 1978. See, such rulings by a nine-judge bench of the Supreme Court are rare. That itself is indicating the importance and complexity of the issue which is there. Okay. So recently, on November 5th, yesterday, the Supreme Court have announced a crucial verdict that restrict the government's power to seize private property solely under the pretense of public welfare. So this verdict not only overturns a long-standing precedent, but also reshapes the legal landscape concerning property rights in India. So let's get into the details of this discussion, and I'll be sharing the PPT. With the help of that, I will be discussing this. So yes, I hope you guys can see the screen, guys. Okay. So, see, in this ruling, the Supreme Court has very clearly stated that the government cannot unilaterally seize private property. So, this is what the Supreme Court have stated, and for the so-called common good, right? Without considering several other factors, we will also look at those factors. See, to simply put, the court has reinforced that individual rights over property take precedence, and the state must justify its actions comprehensively if it intends to acquire private property. 8 out of 9 judges in this bench actually agreed to this decision, with one judge expressing a dissenting opinion, which we will be discussing shortly. Let's look at the background of the case. Okay, so let's understand the background. So to understand how this matter have reached the Supreme Court, the case basically originated from the petition filed by Mumbai-based Property Owners Association. So they challenged certain provisions in the Maharashtra Housing and Area Development Act 1976, specifically the Chapter 8A, which allowed the state government to acquire private property at a compensation rate which is equivalent to 100 times the monthly rent of the property. So this essentially meant that if a property had a monthly rent of rupees 1 lakh, the state could acquire it by offering 1 crore in compensation. So the Property Owners Association contended that this law was unfair and infringing the property rights of individuals. So that's the background of the case. So now let's look at 1978 judgment also. So, see, this petition was initially filed way back in 1992, and after years of legal proceedings, it was referred to a nine-judge bench in 2002. And finally, after almost 30 years, the verdict has been delivered. So the court's ruling now limits the government's authority to seize private property under Article 39 Clause B of Indian Constitution, which focuses on securing material resources for the community's benefit. So that particular article allows the state to take the property, use the material resources for the community benefit. But the court have clarified that private property does not qualify as a material resource for public use. So simply based on the common good argument, you cannot use simply that common good and public benefit, and you can take private property just like that. It's not comes under that material resources. Let's also understand the 1978 judgment in this context. So, guys, let's just revisit this judgment, State of Karnataka versus Ranganatha Reddy and others. So, in that case, Justice Krishna Iyer delivered a judgment stating that community resources could include private property, implying that private assets could be considered resources for public benefit, whether it is natural, man-made, publicly or privately owned. So it could be considered as material resource. So that was the judgment which was delivered by Krishna Iyer, very prominent judge. Okay. And this viewpoint was actually reaffirmed in subsequent cases, such as in 1982 and 1990 rulings, where the Supreme Court upheld that the private property could indeed be classified as community resource under Article 39B of the Constitution. But the current verdict, if you see, has overturned this interpretation, restricting the state's power to classify private property as public resource. Now, you cannot simply, on the pretext of the common good, you cannot use private property as a material resource. Okay, so let's look at the rationale behind this judgment. So, guys, if you look at the rationale, Supreme Court current ruling, this ruling reflect the evolving economic and social landscape in India. So the court pointed out that while such measures were necessary in 1960s and 70s, where the era was focusing on nationalism and state-led development, the situation today is vastly different. So we got independence and we were looking for, equality and many other things and social reforms and developments at that point of time. Now the things have changed. Since 1991 economic reforms, India have embraced a more open and market-driven economy, prioritizing private properties, rights, and economic freedom. So it's more of market-led economy, demand-supply economy. So the court noted, and most of the nationalization now it has become privatization, right? So the court also noted that if the government were to acquire private property arbitrarily today, it could discourage investment and economic growth, likening it to practice in authoritarian regimes. So that recognized India as one of the world's fastest growing economy. And the court emphasized that need to protect private property rights in line with this growth. So if India need to grow and on the line similar to world, which is completely based on, demand supply equation or market economy, this has to be, protecting private property is very much essential. Now, when it comes to the criteria for acquiring private property as a community resource, see, that also have laid certain criteria that the government must consider before declaring any private property as a community resource. Now, this include the nature and characteristics of the resource, its impact on public welfare, the balance between state control and private ownership, and the scarcity or availability of the resource. Only after thorough evaluation of these factors aligned with the public trust doctrine can state make a case of acquiring private property in the public interest. So I repeat, the factors include nature and the characteristics of the resource, its impact on public welfare, and the balance between state control and private ownership, and the scarcity of the availability of the resource also. Now coming to the dissenting opinion, guys, interestingly, Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia, the only dissenting judge, opined that there could be scenarios where private property might indeed need to be classified as community resource to meet specific goals. There is nothing strange in this, because if you see at one point of time, all the judges were considering like this only. But now the situations and the circumstances have changed, the economy have changed. So 1 out of 9 may be thinking still in that way. There is nothing wrong in that. But here, since his opinion was outvoted by the majority, it did not influence the final outcome. Even if 5 of them are supporting, it will go. Right? If you remember Keshwan Tabardi case, it was based on 7-6, 7 in favor and 6 was against. It's a thin majority. But here that's not the case. Their majority was only 1. Here the only 1 opinion against. Now the court's majority ruling, basically delivered by Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, emphasized that not every resource owned by individual could be deemed a community resource based on solely on the premise of this common good or public welfare. So now let's look at the conclusion. That was the dissenting opinion. I've mentioned this. Okay. Now the impact. See, this ruling by Supreme Court has set a very crucial precedent in the Indian legal landscape. So it emphasizes that while the government have role in redistributing resources for public benefit, yes, it is accepted, it cannot infringe on private property rights without adequate justification. And the justification factors also we have discussed. And this decision is likely to have far-reaching implications that will ensure greater respect for individual property rights, and it will provide clarity on the limits of governmental authority in matters of property acquisition. So that's about this session, guys, and thank you so much for watching. See you soon in the next video.